Matters with Paul Rosen.
Our diets, our Western diets in America are just really, you just don't realize how poor they really are.
What would you say to others who would like to feel better?
Sometimes you need to find the instruction. That's where the testing and everything comes in, because without that knowledge, there's no way I could have got to the point where I'm at today.
Straight talk about health.
And then I start preaching and telling them what I've been doing. And this guy named Paul Rosen has changed my life.
With your host, Paul Rosen.
By the way, the information contained in this program is not approved by the FDA, nor intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any medical condition or disease as defined by Western medicine. However, skilled practitioners of many disciplines have found nutrition response testing to be a highly reliable supportive technology for assessing the health and fitness of the body's functional system.
In recent years, Paul Rosen, the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has been required by law to issue new dietary guidelines for Americans. And what do you think of these guidelines, Paul?
By the way, it's a fairly recent thing, too. They only have to do this. They've been required to do this only since 1990.
Yeah, it's a joke.
It's a joke.
It's a joke. I mean, the guidelines are absolutely useless. They do not reflect the current state of the science. Most importantly, they don't reflect the current state of clinical manifestation of different types of things. I mean, cholesterol, for one, is just, for the most part, is simply not an issue. It's a non-issue. And yet, the guidelines are, in their view, are pretty much a reflection of the notion that you have to, be careful with respect to the saturated fats that you consume. So, if you look at the guidelines, it used to be a pyramid. Remember, there used to be a food pyramid?
I do recall that, yes.
Now there's a food plate.
A food plate.
Because they figured that, visually people wouldn't understand a pyramid.
I wonder, too, what was the
I'm
impetus?
joking.
I know. I got you. That's okay. You're not going to get anything except my nod of recognition for your joke. There you go.
Oh, I'm not.
So basically, I wonder first about the impetus for making the USDA issue these guidelines. What was the purpose of that? Is it just make good work for
the higher purpose was to help people choose healthy foods. I mean, I get the higher purpose is there. It's just that the actual how should we say?
The actual product
the
itself.
follow-through isn't.
So is it based on long-standing misconceptions, these things that have come out that really don't seem to serve any real purpose?
I am not a cynical person. I am a totally upbeat, hopeful, take responsibility, make things happen kind of person. But just follow the money. I mean, throughout the whole history of the FDA and USDA, just follow the money, and the money lies in the hands currently of the big pharma, the American Medical Association, the food industry, and what you'll see a rather ugly story of how grains became the foundation of our diet, and they shouldn't be. And I'm going to talk more about that.
Okay,
but
so
they absolutely shouldn't be.
Are all those influences having an influence on these dietary guidelines? As a matter of course, we're just going to go ahead and assume that's the case.
Absolutely make the assumption. It's totally the case.
Okay, so are there other factors, though? When I say long-standing misconceptions, I'm thinking of something less insidious. Maybe just they're operating under false assumptions.
They are operating under false assumptions, but even those assumptions were created by extremely poor science and people who wanted to be famous. They wanted power. So the grain industry began to market and promote grains as a healthy foundation for a diet, and like all good corporations. They want a bigger piece of the pie.
Let's focus on that then. Grains in particular. Is the fact that the USDA recommends these things as being part of a healthy diet or a significant part of a healthy diet a wider misconception? Is it something just that the government believes, or is it something that's spread all throughout the food culture?
Spread throughout the food culture now. So regular grain consumption began a measly 10,000 years ago by most estimates.
That doesn't seem very measly to me.
Well,
I mean,
if you think the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, 10,000 years is but a measly speck.
So how did we as human beings start leaning towards grains?
So before the agricultural revolution, humans had a couple 100,000 years of not having any regular consumption of grains. And studies show that human brain function and physical ability actually peaked just prior to the agricultural revolution. Since the dawn of agricultural practices, archaeological evidence shows a gradual but steady decline in human strength and capacity.
Really?
Uh-huh. Grains contain something called phytic acid. It's a mineral blocker that prevents the absorption of extremely important minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, copper, and zinc. These 5 minerals, and we've talked about this on a number of occasions. In fact, we just did a mineral show not that long ago. For those of you who may have missed it, you can go to my website and click on the radio show page, follow the directions, and get to that show. I think it's still on.
It's on the KPAM
still
website
on the KPAM,
also.
Website. So phytic acid is found in the bran of all grains as well as the outer coating of seeds and nuts. Evidence shows that sprouting increases the content of many important vitamins and, more importantly, breaks down this phytic acid. But few people take time to do this, although now in such stores as Whole Foods or New Seasons, I think maybe Trader Joe's and some specialty stores will contain sprouted nuts or even grains.
So they're promoting this as something that's good for us, obviously, if it's in those stores, right?
And if you're going to be eating lots of them, it's a smart thing to do. Or, in the case of nuts, at least roast them in high-quality, organic oil.
And why will that help?
As it breaks down that chemistry.
Okay. Also, let's go back for a moment, too, Paul. If we say that there are industrial pressures on the government to include grains as part of a healthy diet, or what they say is a healthy diet.
Let's just say that's true, and it is, yes.
Okay, let's go with that. What was the impetus 10,000 years ago at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to make this turn towards grain? Is it because it was a commodity that was easy to farm, easy to create, or, again, why the widespread use of it before there might have been commercial interests?
Well, if I had to speculate, I would suggest that it was a matter of, when people started to settle down in larger communities. Hunter-gatherers were what we were many, 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 many years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, you moved from place to place. You followed the game.
Well, we could go with a much more recent example. During colonial American times in the late 18th century, early 19th century, 4 out of 5 Americans were farmers. So not only were we gathering in more urban areas, but I think we were also all engaged in more agriculture. So we were probably looking for commodities that we could produce on a widespread basis.
So my argument here overall is not to say that grains are horrible and nobody should eat any grains. That's not my argument, right? I don't eat them based on my own personalized nutritional healing program, mm-hmm. and also my genetic makeup and blood type.
So the argument, or I should say the statement you're making is what?
What I'm saying is that grains are not necessarily a foundational product for, most people with respect to their diets. What I'm saying is they can be a part of a diet, but not the foundation.
That's a very important distinction.
If you give the population the general impression that grain should be the foundation, which is what the USDA guidelines does, then that is going to misguide, millions of people, millions of them. The grains that we currently consume, like the wheat and the corn, are not the same grains that, human beings began to farm thousands of years ago.
So I'm going to guess there are a number of factors in that. Among those are the fact that we can now produce grains in greater abundance. There are reasons that we can create more of them, right?
No, it's not the abundance factor. It's the fact that they have basically been bred to be less protein and more carbohydrate, number one.
Why is that? Why less protein, more carbohydrate?
Well, they're fatter and plumper and sweeter, and
so they taste better.
Well, some people think so,
and maybe that addresses my point too, Paul. If they're fatter and plumper, there are more of them, right?
The other thing is that they are also in large part now genetically modified.
That's the point I was getting at, also. So that,
but even worse, they're grown with synthetic fertilizers, and they're grown with lots and lots of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides.
And that's the point I was trying to get to, I guess, is that we now have techniques for producing more grain, but based on those factors, maybe it's not the healthiest grain.
Well, the question is whether it is more grain because of these techniques, or could you use other techniques and produce the same amount of grain, but with but not harm the crop in the meantime?
Is there some feeling that the types of grain being produced not only are just more plentiful, you can get a greater yield from that crop, but they're somehow better for us? In other words, are they just meeting what the market demands? You say it's a sweeter grain.
Yeah, but they're not better for us. That's the issue. That's why the USDA guidelines are something to be avoided. The grains are not better for us because grains in general, and we've talked about this, basically are high glycemic foods. That is, they cause the body to produce lots and lots of insulin. And now we have discovered that the obesity, the rise of obesity and overweight people in the United States is basically due to insulin resistance.
That's bad. Are grains omnipresent in our foods?
They are omnipresent in our foods. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Everywhere, and in so many processes. Fillers, isolates, colorings, all kinds of stuff.
You name it. So can we look on an ingredient package or the ingredients on a package and see that grains are there?
Sometimes. It's not always identified as a grain.
So how do we go about lessening the amount of grain in our diets?
Eat fresh food.
There you go. It's always the same thing.
I knew you set me up for that one.
I sure did. It's always the same
fresh
thing.
Food. Yeah, you eat fresh food. Yes, that means you have to cook. Oh my gosh. Right? But yet there are some producers out there, and that's one of the things that we share with our patients, our clients. We put them onto some already produced foods. Some companies that are extremely pay attention to detail.
And this is what you mentioned earlier, Whole Foods, for example. Some of their products.
No, I mean the actual products in there, not the stores that sell them.
Okay.
The products.
Well, that's what I was referring to also. Maybe certain things that they, for example, and others might have available that fit these more nutritional standards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're lucky that way. We have, we have every resource to eat completely and totally supportively for our health. I want to say eat healthy because the notion of eating healthy for most people is unfortunately based on a lot of misconceptions. They think if they're eating something fresh that it's healthy. I'll give you an example. Kale. Kale has become, next to godliness these days. It's a big fad.
Right.
Lots and lots of people are consuming raw kale. They shouldn't.
No, please, no! No!
Yeah,
no!
Don't eat the raw kale. Boy, that guy in particular.
That guy. Oh my gosh, it's first of all, it's incredibly difficult to digest. It has an abundance of oxalates, which is a chemistry that makes it very hard to digest and absorb any of the other food that you've consumed. So if you're going to eat kale, make sure that it's somehow prepared.
You know, that stuff
fermented, steamed, stir-fried, something.
It's become so ubiquitous. You can even buy something like kale chips.
Kale chips, yeah.
Kale chips.
But I will tell you that there are lots and lots of people who shouldn't be eating kale. And the way that we find out is, of course, using that nutrition response testing technology to identify the specific foods for each individual. Kale is a food that really shouldn't be eaten by lots of people.
Let's bring it back to grains.
Really hard on kidneys.
Is it really?
Really hard on kidneys. Yeah.
Not a good thing.
Not a good thing.
Regarding grains and the USDA guidelines, are people really paying attention to these, Paul? Every 5 years, is there a rush to the government pamphlet office to pick up a copy of the USDA guidelines for diet? Or are there manufacturers or other food preparers who pay attention to these guidelines? Or really, are they just kind of out there and nobody's really, looking at them at all?
Well, because the manufacturers have a hand in producing the guidelines, they absolutely, what is available and what they market as healthy, right? It kind of goes hand in hand as far as whether people go out and whether they can't wait to, you used to be able to get a phone book. Mm-hmm. What the heck is that anymore? Anyway, right? The people would wait on their doorstep for their phone books, their new phone books.
So
they're not doing that, but the problem is it doesn't really matter because the food industry is paying attention. They help produce those guidelines. What's available to us to buy is reflective of, that hand-in-hand relationship.
And do they market themselves as, meeting USDA guidelines?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
That's exactly what happens.
So there's kind of
they say, oh my gosh, we're meeting the USDA guidelines, as if that was something, to boast about. And it really isn't.
But it sounds good. It would be like in a previous era saying a certain product had the Good Housekeeping seal.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Exactly. What does that mean?
What exactly does that mean?
And most, the corporations account on the fact that people won't dig any deeper than that.
Well,
and the proof of that is the way they sell pharmaceuticals these days. If you watched a pharmaceutical commercial in isolation, like as if you weren't from this planet, you'd go, what the heck?
How so? What do you mean, what the heck?
Well, 10 seconds of the commercial is what is the introduction of the medication and then what it's for, right? 45 to 50 seconds are about all of the collateral damage, the side effects that the warnings that taking this medication involves.
Right. If your skin grows purple, your head grows larger.
So you go like, well, what?
Why would you want to take this
Why
stuff?
would you ever want to do that, right? Especially if there was an alternative. Now, of course, the alternatives are going to be held, the alternatives are not just held a secret, but be suppressed by these companies that sell this unbelievable garbage.
And that relates directly to our discussion today because it's misinformation.
Exactly.
Right?
Thank you.
On a serious note, USDA food guidelines, which are issued every year, tell us that we should include grains as part of a healthy diet.
Not just include. This is important. This is an important point to make. They issue guidelines that say grains should be the foundation of your diet. That is to say, make up a large percentage. That's where we part ways.
Right.
That's where we disagree.
And for reasons you explain, grains are
for reasons I've been explaining. I want to go into the insulin issue a little bit more, but before I do that, my patient Catherine came to me with various, shall we say, symptoms. Challenges, and she got her personalized nutritional healing program utilizing nutrition response testing, and some of this was news to her. May take a few segments to get to that for her, but shall we start with one?
Here we go.
I had tried many alternative methods of healing my knee and joint issues, and it just they all helped, but it wasn't long term.
Right, and so, I mean, how? I guess what I should ask is, what were those methods you tried?
Oh, well, of course I tried Western medicines first because that was, what you did when I dumped those pills and got rid of those.
So you were trying, you were taking some prescription medications.
Right. It was just for pain, and I knew that was not going to do anything. So I didn't go back, and I used acupuncture, and I went to the acupuncture school in Albuquerque, and it did help. It really did. I just used all kinds of alternative methods, and when I got here, when I moved to Washington, I had some massage therapy that was very therapeutic and really helped.
Oh, we love massage.
Oh, yes. But then it just started getting worse. I had a couple of years where, it was a lot better.
Right.
And then I had a friend that recommended, because she had started her program with you, her nutrition program, and she called me at home one day and she said, I think this is what you need.
And so, what I was going to say was, so you tried lots of things. Was it just the pain that you were concerned about? Were there other symptoms?
Well, there was weight gain. I have a small bone structure. I'd always been never had a real weight problem, and that was it looked more than it was more puffy. It didn't seem like so much weight.
So it seemed like more like excess water gain than.
Yes, and because I had pain, I couldn't exercise. I wasn't as active.
Right.
And my energy was low. And
what about your sleep?
Not really. Sometimes I would just die. I'd just be so tired.
Right.
And then, when I would get up, even if I had what I thought was a decent night's sleep, I would get up and I would feel tired. I just didn't have the get up and go, the energy. That
you used to have?
Yes, because I was always very active. I didn't have to have a whole lot of sleep.
Yeah, you're sparky. You're sparky.
Well, I'm getting a little sparkier.
You're getting sparkier.
When I first came to you.
Yeah, exactly. So you said that you had a friend who recommended coming and seeing me and using this nutrition response testing.
Yes.
And so how long did it take for you to actually take action?
Not very long.
I'm just wondering, a day, a month, a week, a year?
It was a few weeks. I don't think it was a full month.
And didn't you do something before coming immediately and seeing me, didn't you?
Well, I had a massage therapist.
Right. No, but didn't you come and see me? I remember you coming to a talk, didn't you?
No, I didn't do it before.
Oh.
I did it solely on her recommendation.
I just must be seeing into the future.
Well, because I keep spreading the word, I keep passing the book around, and then I have another book I'm passing around, and
you're talking about The Great Health Heist, the book that I wrote.
Yes, I am. And what I did, the first thing I did was make copies of the explanation that you give at the first meeting. I just, this is great information. So I made copies of it, and I passed it around to several of my friends, and I've got some very enthused friends.
Oh, that's fabulous.
That are really wanting to do this. That are really wanting to come.
So was you came? I mean, you heard from your friend. You decided that you were going to take the next step and come in, get evaluated.
Yes.
And were you? I mean, when you called? Were you treated well?
Oh, very, very. The office staff is just so helpful, and answered my questions and that I had, and yes, they're very helpful. It's a very sparky atmosphere.
Sparky's the word for the morning. That's
Yes.
Well, I mean, you get the idea that we care, I hope.
Oh yes. Oh, yes, very definitely.
So there we have a good commercial for you, Paul, as a matter of fact. She's talking about
Isn't that what testimonials are all about?
Well, but she's specifically talking about the quality of service she received from you. More importantly, though, her issues were addressed. Is that right? She had a number of things going wrong.
Clearly, from her upbeat and, positive
demeanor.
Demeanor, yeah, I guess you'd say demeanor. And we'll get into those a little bit later, but like I say, it was the recognition, and that's sort of what I want in her own words to say, but it's the recognition of how important the food really is. You see, she did a lot of other types of therapies that are done to her. Massage, chiropractic, acupuncture, these types of things, all really, really useful, non-pharmaceutical, non-suppressive, non-promoting collateral risks or damage. So very good in nature, but still something missing, right? Still something temporary about the relief.
And the biggest missing element was her
nutrition,
diet.
Her diet.
Okay. She wasn't paying attention to that.
Her diet.
Would she have been somebody to go out and buy foods that said approved by the USDA?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, people look for you can look for a label. You can see a USDA label.
And I didn't catch from her story. She wasn't necessarily a junk food eater, was she?
I don't think she was a junk food eater, but I'm sure she had her share. People don't realize that junk food includes things like organic corn chips, right? Because they're organic, and I mean, there's so much foods that people accept. They think they're not junk food, but they really are.
Yeah, and I think that's really good marketing. They're saying, hey, this is okay. You can have these chips because they're organic, or they're kale chips or something like that.
Right. I mean, for the most part, kale chips are junk food.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that's blasphemy to some folks.
No, please, no, no!
Yeah, I'm afraid so, folks. They are junk food, Steve Carell.
But and the reason is because when you prepare your own food, you know exactly what's in it. When you buy a prepared food, you don't. You really don't.
One more note, you can get a free chapter of Paul Rosen's book, The Missing Piece. Just go to his website, acunatural.com, acunatural.com, and fill out the dialog box that pops up. Rest assured, no information you provide will ever be shared with anyone else. So, what are you waiting for? Get going on your personal road to wellness today.